Hi, Lady in Blue. Claire Hayes was only 4 years old when she started talking to someone in the park. The problem was, nobody else could see who she was talking to. And over the next 5 weeks, 5 impossible things happened. 5 warnings a little girl should never have known. This is the story of what happened in a quiet park in Phoenix, and the miracle of the Virgin Mary that no one has ever fully explained. But before we continue, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. Now let's go back to the beginning. Jennifer Hayes lived a simple life. 32 years old, married for 7 years, a small apartment in Phoenix, a healthy little daughter named Claire, and a husband who was gone more often than he was home. Brandon Hayes worked as a medical equipment salesman. Good salary, reliable career, but the job kept him traveling constantly across Arizona, sometimes 3 days a week, sometimes 4. He usually left Monday mornings and returned late Thursday night, sometimes not until Friday. So most days, it was just Jennifer and Claire. Breakfast, laundry, cleaning dishes, trying to keep a 4-year-old entertained for endless hours inside a quiet apartment. And honestly, some afternoons felt unbearably long. That's why Jennifer started taking Claire to the community park every day around 3 in the afternoon. It gave Claire somewhere to play, and Jennifer somewhere to breathe. Fresh air, movement, noise, people. Even if she rarely spoke to anyone, Claire loved the park immediately. The colorful playground, the swings, the long slides, the squirrels running beneath the trees. Every afternoon became part of their routine. The park itself wasn't very large. There was a central playground surrounded by benches beneath old trees, a walking trail looping around the grass, a small popcorn stand near the entrance, and in the farthest quiet corner of the park, there was something most people barely noticed. A stone structure hidden partially behind old trees. Jennifer only discovered it because one afternoon Claire chased a squirrel in that direction. The structure looked old, very old. Circular stone walls maybe 6 feet across, weathered by decades of Arizona heat. In the center stood a marble statue of the Virgin Mary, about 3 feet tall, hands extended gently forward, face calm, peaceful, and draped over her shoulders. A faded blue mantle that somehow still looked beautiful despite the years. Rose bushes surrounded the stone niche. Nobody seemed to care for them, yet somehow, they bloomed anyway. Soft pink roses, white roses, occasional deep red blossoms among the leaves. Jennifer walked past the statue dozens of times without thinking about it. Until that Tuesday afternoon. The weather was perfect. Warm, but not unbearable. Blue sky overhead. Children laughing around the playground. Everything ordinary. Jennifer sat on her usual bench, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone, while Claire raced up and down the slide nearby. Then suddenly, Claire disappeared. Every parent knows that feeling. That instant of panic. Those few seconds that feel like an eternity while your eyes desperately search for your child. Jennifer stood immediately scanning the park. And then she saw her. Claire stood inside the stone niche directly in front of the Virgin Mary statue. Perfectly still. Tiny hands resting against the stone edge. Head tilted upward. Eyes fixed on the marble face. Jennifer relaxed slightly. Everything was fine. Claire was only looking at the statue. Then Jennifer noticed something strange. Claire's lips were moving. She was talking. Jennifer slowly walked toward the niche, her sneakers brushing softly through the grass. But Claire didn't turn around. She seemed completely absorbed. "Claire," Jennifer asked gently. Claire turned immediately. "Hi, Mommy. Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" Claire looked back toward the statue, then toward Jennifer again as though the answer should have been obvious. The lady in blue. Jennifer felt a strange chill slide down her spine. Not fear exactly, just sudden uneasiness. The lady in blue? Claire pointed directly toward the Virgin Mary statue. Her. Jennifer looked at the marble figure. Cold stone. Faded paint. Nothing more. At least that's what logic said. And what does she say? Jennifer asked carefully. Claire thought for a moment, as though deciding whether she should share a secret. Important things. Jennifer almost smiled nervously. It had to be imagination. Children created imaginary friends all the time. That was normal. Completely normal. What kind of important things? Claire shrugged casually now. Just things. Then immediately asked, "Can I go play again?" Of course. Claire ran back toward the playground laughing happily like nothing unusual had happened. But Jennifer stayed there another few seconds, staring at the statue. The Virgin Mary's marble face looked strangely peaceful beneath the shade of the trees. Almost alive somehow. It's imagination, Jennifer whispered to herself. She's 4 years old. But over the next several days, it happened again, and again, and again. Every afternoon, Claire eventually wandered back toward the stone niche. Sometimes after 5 minutes, sometimes 20, but always eventually. She would sit quietly near the statue, speaking softly beneath her breath, pausing occasionally, as though listening to responses. Jennifer watched from a distance every time, trying not to feel unsettled, trying not to overthink it. One Thursday evening, she mentioned it casually to Brandon during a phone call. She's talking to the Virgin Mary statue again. Brandon laughed softly from whatever restaurant he was eating inside several cities away. Imaginary friend. That's normal. I know, Jennifer answered. But it feels strange. How? Jennifer struggled finding words. She talks like someone is actually answering her. Jen. Brandon sounded exhausted now. She's 4. Everything feels real when you're 4. Jennifer knew he was probably right. But still, something about it bothered her. Not in a dangerous way, just strange. Then came Thursday afternoon 2 weeks later. The day everything changed completely. Jennifer sat on her usual bench while Claire spoke quietly near the statue. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Until suddenly, Claire jumped up and ran toward her mother. Fast, urgent, eyes wide. Mom. Jennifer immediately stood. What's wrong? Claire pointed across the park toward a little boy running near the rose bushes. Maybe 6 years old. Green shirt, blue shorts. Perfectly ordinary. That boy, Claire whispered anxiously. He's going to get stung by a bee. Jennifer frowned slightly. What? The lady said it's dangerous. You have to tell them now. There was something different in Claire's voice. Not childish imagination. Not pretend play. Fear. Real fear. Jennifer looked again toward the boy and immediately noticed bees moving around the rose bushes nearby. The child kept running directly toward them, laughing carelessly. Jennifer's instincts suddenly took over. She scanned quickly until spotting a woman reading a book several benches away. Probably the boy's mother. Jennifer hurried toward her. Excuse me, she said quickly. Does your son have any allergies? The woman looked confused. What? Bee allergies specifically? And instantly, the woman's face changed completely. Panic. Pure panic. Yes, she whispered. He's severely allergic. If we're wrong, Jennifer whispered nervously to Brandon, people will just think we're crazy. Brandon looked toward the massive oak tree stretching over the crowded picnic area. Families sat beneath it laughing. Children chased each other through the grass. Barbecues smoked beneath the branches. Everything looked completely safe, perfectly normal. And yet, Claire had already been right 4 times. 4 impossible warnings. Brandon looked down at his daughter. She was crying so hard her whole little body shook. Not pretending, not imagining. Terrified. The lady said we have to hurry, Claire sobbed. She said people are going to get hurt. That was enough. Brandon stood instantly. Everybody move away from the tree. He shouted loudly across the picnic area. People looked up in confusion immediately. Some annoyed, some amused, some simply ignoring him. Jennifer joined in. Please. Everyone needs to move away from the tree right now. A few parents stood reluctantly, gathering children. Others stared at Brandon and Jennifer like they'd lost their minds. What's wrong with the tree? Someone shouted. We think it might fall, Brandon answered. A few people laughed nervously. The oak tree looked enormous and healthy. Solid. Ancient. Impossible to imagine collapsing. But Jennifer didn't care any more about embarrassment. Not after the swing. Not after the gas leak. Not after everything else. Please just move. She begged desperately. Slowly people began backing away, mostly because Jennifer and Brandon looked genuinely frightened. Parents grabbed children. Picnic blankets folded hurriedly. Families stepped farther across the grass. And then, a sound. Deep. Sharp. Violent. Crack. The entire park froze instantly. A massive branch split from the oak tree with a deafening snap. Not a small branch. One enormous enough to crush everything beneath it. The branch crashed downward directly into the picnic area. Tables exploded apart. Metal chairs twisted violently. Barbecue grills flipped across the grass. People screamed. Children cried. And then silence. Terrified silence. Dust and broken leaves filled the air. Everyone stared at the destroyed picnic area in shock, because only seconds earlier, families had been sitting there. A woman slowly turned toward Jennifer, holding her child tightly against her chest. "Oh my God!" Another father stared at the shattered tables and whispered, "We were just sitting there." Claire buried her face against Jennifer's shoulder, crying softly now. But her tears had changed. Not panic anymore. Relief. Jennifer held her daughter tightly, while her own legs shook so badly she could barely stand. 5 warnings. 5 impossible warnings. And now there was no room left for coincidence anymore. Not inside Jennifer's heart. Not inside Brandon's either. That night, after Claire fell asleep, Jennifer and Brandon sat alone in the kitchen for nearly an hour without speaking. The apartment felt strangely quiet. Heavy somehow. Finally, Brandon broke the silence. "What if she's really talking to someone?" Jennifer looked down at the untouched cup of tea between her hands. "I've been asking myself that for weeks." "The Virgin Mary?" Brandon whispered almost uncomfortably. Jennifer shook her head slowly. "I don't know, but something is happening." Neither of them slept much that night. Because once logic begins breaking apart, people start questioning everything they thought they understood. The next afternoon, they returned to the park together. Not because Jennifer wanted to. Honestly, part of her was afraid now. But Claire insisted softly during breakfast. "She wants to see me." So they went. The park looked exactly the same as always. Children playing. People walking dogs. Parents talking beside benches. And yet after yesterday, everything felt different. Especially the stone niche. Jennifer noticed something immediately as they approached. Flowers. Fresh roses covered the base of the Virgin Mary statue. Dozens of them. White roses. Pink roses. Red roses. Candles too. Someone else knew. News about the fallen tree had spread quickly through the neighborhood. People talked, whispered, wondered, and somehow, the story about the little girl warning everyone spread with it. Several strangers glanced toward Claire as the family walked through the park. Some curious, some emotional, some frightened. Claire barely noticed any of it. She simply walked calmly toward the statue like always. Then suddenly, she stopped, completely still. Jennifer and Brandon exchanged nervous glances. "What is it?" Jennifer asked softly. Claire stared upward at the Virgin Mary statue, silently for several seconds. Then smiled. A small, peaceful smile. She says, "Thank you." Jennifer felt tears instantly burn behind her eyes. For what? Claire looked back toward the playground. Toward the families. Toward the people alive because warnings arrived in time. For listening. A warm wind moved gently through the trees at that exact moment, carrying the scent of roses across the park. Strong. Beautiful. Impossible to ignore. Jennifer noticed it immediately. So did Brandon. They looked at each other silently. Because there were no blooming rose bushes anywhere close enough for the scent to feel that strong. Yet the fragrance surrounded them completely for several seconds. Then slowly faded away. Neither parent spoke. Neither tried explaining it. Something stopped needing explanations eventually. Over the following weeks, Claire stopped giving warnings. No more emergencies. No more desperate runs across the park. No more impossible predictions. But she still visited the statue every afternoon. Still sat quietly speaking softly beneath the trees. Only now, Jennifer no longer interrupted. Sometimes Claire laughed during the conversations. Sometimes she listened quietly. Sometimes she simply sat peacefully beside the statue without speaking at all. And little by little, the fear inside Jennifer faded, replaced by something else. Something calmer. Something strangely comforting. One evening, near sunset, Jennifer finally asked the question that had haunted her for weeks. "Claire, what does the lady in blue look like?" Claire smiled immediately. "She's beautiful." "How?" Jennifer whispered. Claire thought carefully, then answered with the simple honesty only children possess. "She looks like someone who loves everybody." Jennifer had to turn away for a second because suddenly tears filled her eyes again. Not tears of fear. Something deeper. Months later, Brandon returned from a work trip and found something new inside the apartment. A small statue of the Virgin Mary sitting quietly on a shelf near the living room window. Exactly like the one from the park. Brandon looked toward Jennifer. "You bought it." Jennifer nodded softly. Neither said anything more, because they both understood already. Claire eventually grew older. School started. Life changed. The strange warnings never returned. And one day, the conversations in the park simply stopped. But Claire never forgot the lady in blue. Not ever. Years later, as an adult, she would still describe the Virgin Mary exactly the same way. Peaceful, kind, and filled with a love impossible to fully explain. To this day, nobody can explain how a 4-year-old girl warned strangers about danger 5 separate times before it happened. Maybe coincidence. Maybe instinct. Maybe something science simply cannot measure. Or maybe a little girl truly was speaking with someone watching over that park beneath the Arizona trees. And if you made it this far to the end of Claire's story, write blue in the comments. The color of the mantle worn by the mysterious lady who may have saved countless lives in that Phoenix park. And every time I read that word, I'll know one more person still believes miracles can happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And share this video with someone who may need hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.